Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to another class of history, politics, and power. I have been talking about Nigeria, tracing the history of our politics, especially after independence. In understanding the past, Nigeria's history is also tied to European history. Remember the Berlin Conference, where European powers came together to divide Africa among themselves? Remember colonization? That is Africa's connection with the West. Even the transatlantic slave trade, it's a connection. Today, we talk about the global system. It's about interconnectivity. So in tracing the history of Africa, we must consistently refer to Europe. Where is Europe coming from? How did the West get that power to control the world at some point? So we are going to go back into time. Welcome to State Affairs. We are streaming from Ibadan, in Oyo State, Nigeria. It's a class of learners. So let's learn. I'll learn from you, and you will learn from me. It's about connection, right? There is no lecturer in this class. It's a class of students inspiring to gain new knowledge. I titled this edition, Africa Awake. Is Africa sleeping? I know that's the question that will come from someone listening. Is Africa sleeping? Africa Awake, the rebirth of knowledge. Is knowledge a child? So, if knowledge has been burned, why do we want to talk about the rebirth of knowledge? Yes, knowledge is a continuous process. You continue to learn. And when you unlearn to learn new things, it is the rebirth of knowledge. Yes, that is what I mean. I'm looking at this age with keen interest. I belong to this age. You belong to this age. In this age of relentless innovation, what do? We must consistently wear new lenses to show things as they really are. We have to break old lenses, not to warp our sights. This is the age of discovery. But every age is the age of discovery. But there's something about this age. The rate of discovery is happening exponentially. Did you listen to the last edition of the program? That was the Monday edition. If you did not listen, I implore you to go back and listen. It is on this page. Just go back. We talked about how Asia is transforming the world. I asked the question, is it about the fall of America and the West? And I suggested, no, really. It is more about the rise of the rest. We talked about technology and how China is reshaping the world. I use the term technological decoupling. I recommended text that you can read to bolster your knowledge of the age of discovery. So this edition is to further that analysis, but we are taking it back into time. If this is the age of discovery, it simply means it is the age of possibilities, where everyone aiming at progress is a driver, not a passenger. You know, in the past, one would say, oh, Edmond Obilo is a professional broadcaster. It was about radio and television at the terrestrial level. But in this age of social media, we've all become broadcasters in our own right. You can easily turn on your phone and begin to send your message on your social media pages. That is broadcasting. And you can see we are all involved in content producing. It is the age of content. And that is why I call it the age of possibilities, where everyone aiming at progress is not a driver. It's a driver rather, not a passenger. It means you must learn to sail the ship. The internet, effectively non-existent 30 years ago, linked 1 billion people by 2005. It linked 2 billion people by 2010 and 3 billion by 2015. As we speak, over half of humanity is online. This is huge opportunity for engagement in commerce, services, and media. You know, here, as we talk history, we also talk commerce, because we are saying, go to darabooks.com and get these books. You can see the books on the table. We are mixing commerce with knowledge sharing. It is the age of possibilities. I don't need to go to Dugbe Market to rent a big shop. You can sell online. That is the age of possibilities. In this age, it is our duty to create the forum to find answers to big burning questions and to create pathways to our own passion. Is that not what I'm doing here? You know, this has become a forum to discuss knowledge, to express my passion, Ayo's passion, Tosin's passion, Samuel's passion. You might not be seeing them, but the fact that you can hear me is due to the work they are putting in. And they are working on devices that make their work easier compared to the past. And they are expressing their passion in their own way. It is about transforming your days into epic journey. And this is born out of the search for new knowledge. Those that are creating the digital transformation that we are consuming are men and women in search of knowledge. Once they stumble on new knowledge, you call that the rebirth of old knowledge. Remember, it is from old knowledge that you get to new knowledge. So there's always a link. You don't delink new from old. Because knowledge is like transition from here to there. Somebody keep improving. You know, research. That transition. Why am I saying Africa awake? Is Africa involved in the production of new knowledge, technological knowledge that is transforming the world. Certainly, Africans are producing new knowledge, no doubt. But are these knowledge systems transforming the world? It is such search for knowledge that gives momentum and vitality to the totality of our works, leading to exceptional achievements. The point I'm making in this class is that this age offers the greatest success to humanity because it sparks stronger and global genius and social order. Now, we will walk down the history lane to trace how the rebirth of knowledge became the rebirth of the politics of Europe, the economy of Europe, and the social structure of Europe. Let me take you back a bit. Let me take you back a bit to the class of Monday. The Monday class. I'm trying to get to that point. Yes. I made this point on Monday. I'm trying to get to that point. I talked about the transformation of the world, that from 1495 to 1540, Portugal was the dominant state in the world. It competed with France, England, and others. The War of Italy and the Indian Ocean from 1494 to 1517 led to the Treaty of Dorsailles of 1517. Look at this. After this period, Spain rose to outshine Portugal in European affairs, and this can be likened to world affairs, as Europe was the center of great power rivalry. I also made the point on Monday that with the truce of 1608, the Church became a dominant player in the politics of Europe. The Roman Empire led this stage. Following the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648 that caused the defeat of the Habsburg dynasty in Spain and Austria-Hungary, a new world order was born with the Peace of Westphalia. If you look at that history, world power politics keeps shifting. And it keeps shifting because of new knowledge. England became the dominant power due to the Industrial Revolution that was triggered in England. Industrial Revolution, new ideas to run industry, machines were born. It was the thought of deep minds. Coming back to the subject of today, I want to go deeper into Europe. To appreciate this age is to look into the history of the world to understand how a similar surge lifted European civilization above others. It is this search for events of the past that made Niccolo Machiavelli in 1517 to state that whoever wishes to foresee the future must consult the past. He says, for human events always resembles those of preceding times. You see the connection I'm talking about? That is why they say you must learn from history if you want to build a great future. Machiavelli was a political scientist. He was a philosopher. He makes the point that the similarity of times arises from the fact that they are produced by men who have been and ever will be animated by the same passions. Are Africans passionate enough about knowledge? If they were, why are Africans not competing with Asia and the West in terms of technological transformation? Why are Nigerian university systems so poor that our university system cannot produce groundbreaking research? Mind you, development is a function of groundbreaking research, deep thinking. Yeah. Still talking about Machiavelli. He says the result is that the same problems always exist in every era. Just that. Man advances his thought to solve them with ease as time goes. Machiavelli was one of the chief philosophers of his age and a founding father of modern political science. You know, he wrote The Prince. Have you read The Prince? Get a copy if you can find one. Machiavelli was one of the great thinkers of European Renaissance. European Renaissance began in the early 14th century and lasted to the beginning of modern inquiry. You know, I can describe the Renaissance in Europe as the revival of the Greco-Roman scientific investigation. I love science. Science is fundamental to nation building. Sometimes when I see our universities, I say we are not serious about knowledge. And you can see why Africa is lagging behind. So today we are talking about knowledge. You see, the Renaissance in Europe resurrected the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome. It paid attention to human interests and values. It began to think of problem solving. Has Africa not gone through its own Renaissance? Or is Africa going through its own Renaissance? The Renaissance I'm talking about in Europe saw the confrontation of supernatural and theological beliefs. You know, that confrontation. You know, Europe also had that belief at that time. Oh, there's one spirit somewhere that controls the destiny of man. If you walk into the shrine, the gods must be appeased or rain will not come. Hey, the disease in the land is because the people have provoked their gods. So therefore, they must make sacrifices to appease the deities of time. Europe also had that belief. But you know what the Renaissance did? it began to confront those belief systems. Raise your phone, and the preacher prays. You begin to get unimaginable alert, and you are raising the phone. The alert will come from nowhere. You must be criminally minded for you to believe that. You have done no work. You have no idea on the table that will solve somebody's problem. But you just believe that a supernatural force somewhere will be called upon, and alert will fly into your phones. And you are screaming, Amen, Amen. The Renaissance confronted such belief systems. Are you in this class? Because of the knowledge that came with it, Renaissance artists regarded the Middle Ages before it as Dark Ages. You know, some of us still live in the Dark Age. Yes, some of us. We still live in the Dark Age. Our belief system. The Renaissance was an intellectual movement that brought about new learning. I'm talking about intellectual curiosity. You know, it brought intense criticism of the ways of the people. And I'm talking about a kind of criticism buoyed by the discovery of the lost manuscripts of classical writers like Firmicus and Cicero, whose oration on Caecina left its mark on the literatures of the Renaissance. Bolaige was called the Cicero because of his use of words, the power of his words, because of his deep knowledge of time. So you can see where that name comes from, Cicero. It's a name of the Renaissance. You know, the Renaissance thinking marked when scholars, poets, and artists began to indulge in self-glorification as they became the shapers of modern thoughts. You know, scholars should be adored, great thinkers, because it's their thinking that creates revolution of ideas. In Africa, some of the poorest minds are those who live to teach. The first-class brains are not teaching, especially in primary schools and secondary schools. The foundation where we can mold the people. Would you blame them? We don't appreciate teaching, so the teacher is poorly remunerated. The teacher operates within the darkness of the system. The teacher is frustrated, so he cannot attract the brightest brains. So what are we churning out? We are churning out a population that is struggling to be redemptive. I'm not taking on this discourse alone. I'll be happy to hear from you as we talk. You know, Niyo Shudari will come into this discourse. Professor Tony Falola will come into this discourse. And you will come into this discourse. So you can see the number on the screen. You can call me, preferably on WhatsApp. It is clearer. And join this discourse. We're not talking about raw politics now. We are talking about the knowledge that is required to build a political system capable of advancing societies. So the line is open. You can join the discourse at this point. I'm talking about the Renaissance. I've talked about Machiavelli. There is a book I would recommend to you, The Story of Philosophy by Brian Magee. The Story of Philosophy. It's about the 2,500 years of philosophy, from the ancient Greeks to the present day. It's an illustrative and deep book. You can see the pictures, quality print. We just have 2 copies of this book. So this book illuminates the major philosophical issues. It focuses on the important questions and analyzes the key works of the great philosophers of time. The ideal reference for both the interested layperson and the student of philosophy. Are you reading philosophical works? I am a reader of philosophical words. I love philosophy. So I have come with this book, The Story of Philosophy by Brian Magee. You can contact us on WhatsApp. The WhatsApp number that you are calling, and you can get a copy from us. And you can also go on udarabooks.com to get books on politics, philosophy, on power, on history. I have a similar book, the politics book. It is the politics book. It talks about sovereignty is not given, it is taken. It talks about communism, political power grows out of the barrel of gun. Who made that assertion? In this work you read about Thomas Hobbes, about Baron Montesquieu. Baron Montesquieu was talking about when legislative and executive powers are united in the same body, there can be no liberty. How? You read about Francisco de Victoria, Agostino Hippo. You read about Al-Farabi, barons of King John, Benjamin Franklin, Abraham Lincoln, Karl von Clausewitz. He says war is the continuation of politics by other means. Klaus von Clausewitz. The politics book. You can get a copy on udarabooks.com. This book is a quality book. You can buy it from somebody as a gift and the person will appreciate it. You can see it here, the politics book. You can get it through our WhatsApp numbers. I'm talking about the Renaissance. I'm talking about knowledge. I have made the point that the Renaissance saw the confrontation of supernatural and theological beliefs. Because of the knowledge that came with it, Renaissance artists regarded the Middle Ages before it as Dark Ages. I have also made the point that it was an intellectual movement that brought about new learning, intellectual curiosity. The Renaissance in the 15th and 16th century in Europe is a rebirth of certain knowledge, styles, and values taken from ancient Greece and Rome. Renaissance is a time of artistic, cultural, and intellectual flourishing. It was a time Europe overtook the rest of the world, leading to European imperialism. So that's why I took you back to the Berlin Conference, the Brussels Conference, the Scramble for Africa. The first scramble for Africa was the transatlantic slave trade. The second scramble was the area of colonization. The third scramble was neo-colonialism after the so-called independence. Are we still in the third scramble, or we are moving into the fourth scramble, the era of technological decoupling? They are invading Africa with different technology, and they are using it to capture our system. Tinubu has been struggling with Binance. Buhari was struggling to shut down Twitter. Elon Musk has come with Starlinks. Oh, we are talking about Starlinks, the fastest internet. What will Starlinks do to MTN and Glo? Instead of scramble. You are having military leadership in West Africa trying to stop Europe. It is a continuation of the scramble. When will Africa stand and say no? The scramble must end. But we can partner with the rest of the world to share resources and knowledge. Renaissance is a time of artistic, cultural, and intellectual flourishing. When is the African Renaissance? Because if I look at the universities, the primary schools, and secondary schools, I don't see that intellectual flourishing. But however, this class is also a way of saying that we can engage at a deeper level and flourish economically and politically. The Renaissance was the time Europe overtook the rest of the world, leading to European imperialism. So because of knowledge, Europe became the dominant force in the world. I'll tell you about the Oriental culture. I appreciate your comment. As you listen, leave your comment. Let me know what you think. Someday I will bring you the interview I had with Professor Pai Obanya. I was asking the professor of education, what is learning? What is education? Is it true that many Africans are not educated? Is it the four walls of a school that makes you educated? Someday you will listen to that interview. The Renaissance is the age of good and bad, like every age. As European navigators, Christopher Columbus in 1494 found the sea route to the New World, and Vasco da Gama found the ocean route to the riches of Asia. Then the natives of Aztecs and the Incas in the New World also wanted to fight back to stop them. As these explorers found their way into the New World, they were confronted by smallpox and other diseases. This was less than a decade after Michelangelo finished the painting of his Sistine Chapel. Have you seen that in Rome? Now I'm coming to the power of art. How the power of art reshaped the minds of Europeans. Art, poetry, history. Renaissance is a contest for the future at a moment when the stakes are highest. We need that contest in Africa. I take Renaissance as the period between 1450 to 1550. Some have different dates, but this is my date. The beginning was the time France and England ended their 100-year war, a conflict that dragged on from 1337. Bloody wars in Europe. In this epoch, Constantinople, the ancient Byzantine capital, around 1453 fell to the military power of the Ottoman Empire, causing massive migration of scholars into Italian city-states of Florence and Venice. The new gunpowder cannons of the Ottomans decided the war, leaving Europeans exposed to the power of the Ottomans. You know, Turkey, the Turkey of this moment, used to be the strongest power in the world. Turkey was at the head of the Ottoman Empire, you know, and kept capturing territories, even captured European territories, Arab territories. But due to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, the Ottoman Empire crashed, and it led to the rise of Europe. You know, when I was talking about the cyclical form of world power in politics or political science, some would call it the long circle theory. We have come back to the Ottomans. So part of the Ottoman Empire was Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq. They were all under Turkey, the leader of the Ottoman Empire. The way Russia controlled the Soviet Union until the fall of Russia, leading to the independence of Ukraine, Latvia, Uzbekistan, Georgia, and others. It's about Africa. It's also about the search for knowledge. I want to bring in Professor Niyo Shudari at this point. Niyo Shudari will look at Africa's cultural problems, and then I will come back, reflect on what Shudari has said, and then go deeper into European Renaissance. So, in 2017, I have so many interviews I've not played before. I've been compiling these interviews, perhaps waiting for great times to explore them. I think I've played Oshundare one time. But the point is that in this interview that centers on Africa's encounter with foreign cultures, you would find meanings of time. So my guest is a poet. That is Professor Niyo Shudari. He is the winner of the 2014 prestigious Nigerian National Order of Merit. Shudari is one of Africa's greatest intellectuals. He used to be at the University of New Orleans, United States, but he started from the University of Ibadan, but he had to leave because he saw the fall of Nigerian university system. Niyo Shudari on State Affairs.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
How do you categorize our cultural development? Is it still archaic?
Archaic in many ways. Archaic and anachronistic. We must also never forget our political history. Colonialism did something terrible to the black person, particularly those in Africa. when the colonial overlords came here, the books we read, some of them say, oh yeah, they were accepted with open hands. No, not in every part of Africa. People knew it was wrong for somebody to come from England or France and rule us. But they had the advantage of, they had the military advantage. The gunboat thing was there. They were extorting taxes, getting people to work. So the idea of Lagun began. That is, when you work for government or when you work for the overlord, make sure you don't sweat. Because many people believe that the profit from this is actually not coming to us. What happened was that when colonialism then went away and we had a country of our own, we extended that kind of mentality to the way we rule ourselves. I spent the first 13 years of my life as a colonial subject. So I knew Nigeria before independence. And I knew the communal efforts that people made in Ikerekiti. Okay, tomorrow we are going to put a long log of wood over the river, that's River Oshun, our own tributary of it, and that will serve as a bridge. There will be sanctions, there will be the town crier or community crier, announcer that will go around, and virtually everybody will be there. There were rules and regulations. People didn't cheat. People didn't think, because they knew they were working for themselves. So there is really nothing wrong with us. I knew a time when my grandmother would tell me, don't lock my door when you're going to sleep, because it's only evil people that lock themselves in. I knew the time you would place a couple of yams at the crossroads and put a couple of pebbles very close to them, and whoever came will count the pebbles and put there a corresponding number of coins. Blind trade, as it were.
Should we then say that because we failed to reform these cultures in our own uniqueness, therefore we could not merge the foreign culture that invaded our system with our past, and we therefore ran into our confusion?
Confusion, yes, confusion and anarchy. Cultural anarchy produced social anarchy. Social anarchy has produced socio-economic political anarchy. You are absolutely right. What was ours, what developed organically from our history, from our culture, was suppressed and in fact denigrated. One of our biggest issues in this country is the way, not just politics, but the way religion was introduced to us. Before the coming of Islam and Christianity, Africa never had any religious war. No.
Is that not a problem on its own? How come Africa allowed itself to be dictated to culturally, economically, and politically?
Yes, we will always ask this question, and I think it's a legitimate question indeed. I must tell you that I do not have an answer to that. Different peoples in the world reacted differently to colonialism. The French, the Dutch, and the Americans tried to visit that kind of colonialism on the people in Southeast Asia, particularly in Vietnam. The Asians resisted, and they fought long battles. Their situation today is different from our own situation. I must say that Africa got itself into this kind of terrible situation because I think there was a certain weakness in our resistance to foreign culture. Could it be because of the liberalism in many African cultures, or could it be because of because the package deal? That is, the other things that Europeans bought. Take my own example. Oshun is the goddess worshipped in my family, and when I was growing up, of course, there were all these indigenous deities. They were not just gods and goddesses, they were the avatars of behavior. They even dictated the economic pace, the seasons of the year, and so on. Now, Islam came, Christianity came, and took over. One advantage, great advantage Christianity had was that it came along with education. When I was to go to school, I was told that I could only go to an Anglican school because my father was Anglican. So whether my father liked it or not, if he wanted his child to go to school, to an Anglican school, he had to be an Anglican. That was really what happened. And as time went on, articles of trade came in, yams and peas and so on were the things, and vegetables were the things we produced. Then something called cocoa came. It was introduced from South America, and our soil did very well with it because it was tropical. Now, virtually all the farmers in Ekiti started growing cocoa to the neglect of the growing of yams. I'm just telling you the pressures that came from abroad. It is not so simple to say, it's because the black person is amenable to oppression, that's why it was happening. So many pressures were coming.
But these same pressures were exerted on a country like India. Even when the Japanese colonized South Korea or the Korean Peninsula, even when Britain tried to invade China, you see, these countries refused to allow their cultural identity to diminish. Buddhism still remains strong in India. China did not lose its language. Mandarin is still very active. How come no African country, to a very large extent, stood its ground to say, this is the way we are going to evolve culturally, politically, and then dictate our own future?
Not all African countries bowed over, though. You may say the examples are few, but we have a country like Ethiopia, the former Abyssinia, that was never colonized, and has its own language, Amharic. And I remember soon after Italy became a country, because Italy was not a country until 1870. Yeah, so recent. Soon after it became a country, Italy also wanted to join other European countries in coming to carve out a territory for itself in Africa. And they came to Ethiopia. I think it was Menelik, King Menelik, who resisted them, and the Italian army was defeated. That's why in 1963, when the OAU was inaugurated and Africans were looking for a capital for it, Addis Ababa was more or less like a natural choice. There is that pride in there too. I know that one example is not enough, but
even at that, sir, even Ethiopia had to rely on the world to save it from the hands of Italy.
Yeah, but
they had to run to the League of Nations at the time.
League of Nations, but why didn't other countries run to the League of Nations? The king had an army that held the Italians at bay. It worked.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
There on State Affairs. He made that point. The discourse is on. Let me go through your comments, because I can see some interesting comments here, and it's a delight to see the comments coming. Okay, Big Pedro is on X. Big Pedro, thank you for always promoting the show. We appreciate you for always being there. Lanista Aspiration. Lanista, thank you for what you do for State Affairs. Lanista creates graphics, taking the show to places where knowledge is required. Reposting. Lanista Aspiration, thank you. Lanista says the term Renaissance can also be applied more broadly to describe any similar cultural revival in history or even within a specific field. A Renaissance in science when there is a renewed interest and remarkable development in that area. Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you totally. But here we are looking at the European Renaissance as it has to do with the knowledge system, the social restructuring of Europe. And I'm asking about the African Renaissance in politics and economy. Let's go on Facebook. You can also call. You can call 080 999 18449. On Facebook, I can see Omotayo Onobamiro. Where do I start from? It says our universities only teach abstract theory, which are not really abstract, with no real or practical utility or application. Our professors, lecturers, and scientists are usually bereft of ideas. Take it easy. I don't think they are bereft of ideas. The ideas are there, but the platforms to express and explore the ideas, the African scholar. That's why you see, when you see the African professor leaves this shore, they began to shine. Toyin Falola was at Obafemi Awolowo University. Somehow, he was a bit restricted by the system, by the Nigerian system. Immediately, Falola left Ife and went to the United States. He became something else. Environment, not really that they are bereft of ideas. It's about the expression of the ideas, the exploration of ideas. Because I read papers written by Nigerian scholars, and I know they have great ideas. We need to create a system that will allow the flourishing of ideas. That is what I think. Adedigba Aliyu says, good afternoon, Edmund. It says Nigeria is not serious about the foundation of our education system anymore. Any serious parent would not send his or her ward to any public school in Nigeria. The situation is even worse in the rural areas. Is it about any serious parents? What about if the parents is serious and cannot afford private schools? We have a lot of students in the public schools. Are we saying their parents are not serious? Okay, I know the point he's making anyway. I think he's saying if they have the opportunity, they might not put their children there. He says, for instance, the secondary school I attended in my hometown is seriously lacking teachers. Even the teachers employed by Sheyi Makinde, they are all striving to transfer themselves away from those schools, just that they have not found their way out. They don't want to live in the rural areas. No light, no water. And you have been living in the city, but because you were employed by government and you are transferred to the rural areas, I'm thinking if I was among those, how I would cope in that kind of system. We keep talking about rural urban drift. It's because we are not growing the rural areas. For somebody like me, my dream home is, something like a ranch in a rural area. But that it is rural does not mean you should not have electricity, you should not have internet. That's the point. That's where I don't like city life, really. I want to stay outside the city, in a natural environment. Do my research, have mango trees in my house, roast corn, have chicken farm, grill my chicken. I just like that life. It makes me happy. So I've always dreamt of that home in a rural area, in a ranch, a farmhouse. But we must create the kind of facilities. If we develop our rural areas, there are so many people living in Bodija. that would prefer to go to the rural area, have fresh air, fresh palm wine, you know. Omotayo Nobamiro says, materialism and the quest for riches and wealth trumps over the quest for knowledge among Africans. That is also one of the bane of our problems. He said he read somewhere that the Europeans are thinking they should prepare for the time they might go into war with Africans in case Africa rose and industrialized. That was the first time I heard or read such a thing from Europeans, because what I was used to hearing or reading from the Europeans was the belief that Africans were inferior, which means Africa is on the verge of rising. Yes, that is why we brought this class, to talk about intellectual subject. And you see, when we go deeper into intellectual talks like this, the viewing reduces. I have noticed. When I begin to shout Obasanjo versus Atiku, that basbo, you get more viewers. But having said that, intellectual talks are deep and we have to engage in them, even if one person is listening. Yes, we have to engage intellectually. I would like to hear from you. You can call our WhatsApp. Niyo Shudari has spoken, talking about African history. I brought 2 books for you. Martin Meredith, The State of Africa. Look at this book. Sweet, sweet book. The State of Africa, A History of the Continent Since Independence. A lovely book. I will not stop recommending this book to anyone interested in the history of Africa. In fact, it is 2 of them. Well-researched work written by the same author. Look at this one. This one is The Fortunes of Africa. The Fortunes of Africa, a 5,000-year history of wealth, greed, and endeavor. This takes us back, even during the Renaissance in Europe, 5,000 years back. Okay, we have a caller. Yes. Hello. Hello. Yes, I greet you.
In fact, you just this morning's class, you took it to the A students. You decided to leave the B and the C and the D. These are A class students. These are A classes. So you literally brought out the word out of my mouth when you said that when conversation gets intellectually engaged, it reduces the traffic, and that is the problem. That is exactly the problem. People prefer to cry, to call. If I wanted to call us, because sometimes I've noticed some of the callers, the kind of things they say sometimes, are like, no, we need to start flogging this mentality. We need to be more solution-oriented. So this morning's class, I want to say thank you very much for this class.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I want to engage you a little this morning, since it's a class. Yeah. You see, the thing is, for Africa, this Renaissance we talked about. My observation about Africa is that we are caught up in the nuances, in the little differences that we have. We are caught up in this thing. So sometimes we don't go past our challenges. We don't go past our challenges. Earlier, you talked about the transatlantic slavery. The transatlantic slavery remains the biggest problem. That in fact, to me, I call it as the biggest disease that has ever happened to mankind. Because after that slavery, humans were declassified. So environment changes, and to today, Caucasians are still, still regarded as superior. Especially depending on which country you have. You can see that sometimes when white people report certain things, the privilege, they enjoy that privilege as a result of the white privilege.
Can you come closer to your phone so that your voice will be louder?
Okay, okay.
Mm.
1 second. What about now?
Aha.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So, so like I said, we are caught up with the nuances. So the transatlantic slavery has, done us more damage. It has done us more damage as a society. So it has created that white privilege. The Caucasian are on the superior side, on on the top class, and I think blacks, African ancestry are on the lower or the bottom of classification of human race. Then again, you talk about industrial revolution. I think the industrial revolution gave Europeans a much added advantage. Like the professor talked earlier, that when they came into Africa, they came in more sophisticated, so it was easy, and truly, yes, I've read a couple of books that they were pushed back, even in the north. Sometimes when people say maybe the northern Fulani hegemony, they just accepted them hook, line, and sinker. No, they were also pushed back. Just that the way the Fulani structure works kind of just make it more suitable for them to operate in terms of governance. But there was also pushback. They were pushback on this thing. But the most important thing they now gave us was the devices that has to do with ethnic, religion, and we as a society, we are caught up with those ethnic and religion. We are caught up with it because those are the devices the European gave us. And when we are caught up with this, so those nuances around ethnicity, around religious, doesn't make us look beyond our differences. So we are caught up with those things. You talked about something which you talked about that military part. You see, I have a friend in Mali, and I will try and even bring him one day to this show. He lives in Mali. He's from Mali, and so when he looks, sometimes when I engage him in this, when Burkina Faso, that military coup happened in Burkina Faso, and the way the young Nigerians specifically are praising these military officers, and the guy begin to shake his head like, we look at power only from the point of presidency. They don't understand what's going on. And the truth is that some of these countries don't have social media like we do in Nigeria, so they don't know what to understand it. All they just see is one young officer who comes and tell you, oh, Russia this, Russia that. And I am really, and if you look at it, you said, okay, you don't want the West, you now part with Russia. So it's like you left your someone who is an enemy to somebody who is not a friend. The West is not, let's say the West is an enemy, but Russia is not your friend. So it goes back to what you talked about this morning. I saw your tweet this morning when you were talking about I want to read that tweet to be specific.
Okay.
I really like that tweet. You talked about the China
Hello.
technology.
Good.
You said China's technology ascendancy and its concerted efforts to assert dominance over vital systems upon which militaries, market, modern society depend, has led to one of the greatest strategic
Network
challenges international. I'd still like you to shed more light on it, but time will happen.
This is an history class now, so
Hmm.
the class of history. So I'm asking you, sir, like,
Hmm.
what do you think will happen if China decide to start practicing like this 4 years democracy, go to the ballot box, go and vote, three-party system, two-party system?
China has resisted that over time. What China has done
Mm.
is to say we can imbibe some ideals of capitalism as defined by the West, but when it comes to our politics, we are going to imbibe the ideals of communism, where leadership is organized, managed, and groomed. Communism emanated from Confucianism, a religion that became a philosophy. So, in that case, if you look at the history of Xi Jinping, he was groomed from the beginning, from the Communist Party. He even lost his father at some point. His father was killed by the communists. But he still loved the Communist Party. So he was groomed, he was trained, he grew up, he took time to rise from the local system to the top. So in that case, nobody wakes up in the morning and all of a sudden becomes the leader of China. You must be groomed within the communist school. You must be indoctrinated within that communist school. And when we talk about communism, sometimes I'm even saying that China should not be talking about communist. China should be talking about Confucianism. Confucianism is a knowledge system. You must learn. You must be groomed in knowledge. It is that knowledge that will propel you to leadership. So if you are tested and you have failed, you cannot attain the height of leadership in China. And China has resisted every attempt to adopt the Western ways. And I understand their ways. If you look at the Han dynasty, China have come a long way, even before Europe. Just that they fell at some point. The fall of China, the fall of Asia, even Iraq. Iraq was the intellectual capital of the world, Baghdad, at some point. What some people call Babylon at some point. So the point I'm making is that they know what works for them. That is not to say they are not modifying their system. They are modifying it to fit modern day challenges, but they are doing it at their own terms. And we have seen the result. China has emerged as a global power.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. You really take us to school. Thank you very much. You gave me a very interesting perspective, because I've always told my colleague that the day China will try this 4 years ballot box system, China is going to die. They will literally die because of the idea. This thing you just gave me a very interesting perspective, because I know the ideology, and that is what is missing in us as Africa. So what we do, we copy and we paste. When you look at this federal system, I live in America, and I can tell you that when I look at the 1999 Constitution, when I look at the federal system in Nigeria, when I look at America, I see similarity a lot. But when I look how power are decentralized, and I laugh, and when I see people caught up with these conversations comparing apples to oranges without understanding the nuances, So in America, like you said about the China, in America is a core capitalist to the core. Do you know that even the prison systems, the prisons in America are private sectors, are owned by private sectors? The prison systems, it is owned by, it's not government. It is owned by private sectors. So just to show you how the capitalist-oriented America is. So it's important for us to understand these ideologies behind the creation of some of this country. Because I see element of capitalism in China, but I know that it's a communist system. And when you see most of the companies in China operating outside China, they are also supported by government funds. They are not just coming alone. Most of them are backed up by their government. So it's an interesting class this morning, Mr. Edmond. You know,
Thank
so
you.
I'm not surprised that people, but I can tell you for the first time, I begin to think of coming home. When you mentioned about the kind of life you want to live at certain retirement, for the first time in my life, when I started listening to listening to you, I begin to look like I can contribute no matter what. It doesn't have to be economy because as we are caught up with this, let me come and invest in Nigeria. No, there are a lot of things we can do as diasporas. Instead of complaining. When people come and say Nigeria will now work, I just like, no. You can't cost Nigeria and think your own. No. We can't do what those mentality has to stop. Nigeria has its own challenges. But we need to have this kind of intellectual conversation to go to the source. To go to the source. And I really think this national orientation program, we need to look into it. Those days of, I know that former DG of NAFDAC has this great people, great nation, or something like that. There's a team, great people, great nation. In those days of 80s, we used to have one song on NTA. Say, lie, I know go, this Nigeria is your own. We need to, there's a lot of things, reorientation. When I saw that you have an engineering background, I wasn't surprised. Because I've been saying the way I try to like, where is it coming from? Does he have an agenda? Does he? Because you re-engineer history, balance it. That's why I really admire your program. And I listened to your on last week. You gave a lecture at a seminar on. You hammer it. You were talking about architecture. You were talking about, when you look at Ife was designed by Israelis. When Awolowo brought those Israelis, when you look at the architect, when you look at Unilag, I finished from Unilag before I left the country. When I look at Unilag, some of the roads, the buildings that was in the colonial, you see that designed. But when you go to Unilag in the later on, during the 2006, 2007, you now started seeing this, what this building they call, there's this prototype building, those Jaconde kind of building. You start seeing them, you see those things started changing. You start those new buildings start changing the face of the school. But when you look at the old colonial building, like the Senate building, the engineering building built by Julius Baja, you see that concrete, that structural design. But these new ones, they are beautiful for the first 2-3 years, but you start seeing them, sometimes it changes the face, the structure. You can see it. You may not see it at the beginning, but after some years later, you started seeing it, start showing that something has happened between certain years. So I saw that, I listened to that lecture, you hammered it. I think if you can try and upload it on your YouTube page, because I tried to go back to it, I didn't see it again. I wanted to forward it to some of my younger brothers I know in that building. That was a very powerful lecture. The room was silent. The room was silent. You hammered them to be the salt of the earth, to be the solution. We can't continue to cry. One thing I've understand about power is that even if you are going to a negotiating table, if you go to a negotiating table as a victim, you can never bargain strength. You can never bargain the lion's share because they already see you. And that's where you see all these our economic ministers, when they go to IMF, they look at them like, people are crying. They just give you the scrum from the table.
Yeah.
But even though when you are not, try to build that mental strength that you know what it takes, even when you don't have it. So that way you can negotiate something good.
Thank you.
Yeah, interesting class this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. It's so exciting to listen to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. That's what a class is about. Let's engage. Let's talk. Let's talk. Yes, there are issues, there are challenges. But if you've listened to me over the years, you know I'm a believer in Africa. I've always made the point that Africa is coming. It's not negotiable. We are coming. Nigeria is coming. That is why this class is entitled Awake Africa, the Rebirth of Knowledge. I was talking about these two books when that call came in, written by the same author. The understanding of the past is the key into the future. This one, The Fortunes of Africa, a 5,000-year history of wealth, greed, and endeavor, written by Martin Meredith. Classic. Get it on udarabooks.com. Another one written by Martin Meredith. The State of Africa, a history of the continent since independence. So you need to get the two. This takes you deeper into the past, into the age of the Renaissance in Europe. And this brings you to contemporary Africa. These are the kind of books you should be having. And don't just have it, let your children read it. Let them read it. Give them to your friends. Buy books as gift. We need to build a knowledge system for development. And we shall build that system. So I've brought these books to you. The Fortunes of Africa and the State of Africa by Martin Meredith. Great reading. Lovely books. I love books. I read books. If you take books away from me, I will die. I will die. I will lose the pleasure of my life. Yes. It was Italy, the center of trade routes. It was from Italy, the center of all trade routes, that the spirit of Renaissance spread to the rest of Europe. Are you a lover of football? AC Milan, Inter Milan. But I've not been to Italy. Edmund, why? I've not been to Italy. It was my wife that went to Italy. She left me behind. Oh. I'll go to Italy, but I will take her along. I want to go to Italy. Because I've read so much about Italian history that sometimes when I'm talking about it, I don't feel complete. Why are you talking so much about Italian history? Go to Italy. But my ambition is to travel to all countries in Africa. It's a mission I will accomplish within the next 5 years. I want to touch the soil of all African countries. And after that, we'll launch that movement for African development. Watch out. The Renaissance established tremendous changes, lifting Europe to the top of global affairs. Europe caught up with Asia and overtook all civilizations in human progress. These changes were driven by the discovery of printing press that enabled literatures of knowledge to be printed and distributed to Europeans eager for new learning. But printing came to China before Europe. You know, I was once a lecturer in a university. I was teaching about media history. And one of the classes I taught was how printing came about. Printing came in China before Europe. But what Europe did was that Europe improved on what was coming from China. You know, we talk about the Gutenberg press, that German, the Gutenberg press. So what Gutenberg did was to create a revolution by improving old ideas. Once printing came to Europe, knowledge was distributed. By 1470, all European countries had movable printing press, leading to intellectual quickening. All right, there's another caller here. I like listening to callers. It's exciting. Hello?
Hello. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yes, good
My name
afternoon.
is, uh, my name is Benga. calling from Limerick, Dublin. Calling from Limerick Island.
All right. Good to hear your voice,
I
Benga.
This is the first time I'm calling. I used to try to call you on Saturday when you are doing your program on Splash, but since the traffic is a lot, so I'm really happy getting through to you this afternoon.
Thank you.
Uh, this is really, really a great work that you are doing, most especially, educating the young people and trying to let us know where we are coming from so that we know where we are going. It's really a pity that history is not really strong in our education in Nigeria again. Many young people don't even know, most of our politicians, most of how these people are coming, where they are coming from, what make them to do some things that they did. So I think it's a really great work you are doing, and I believe one day Africa will get there, because when you look at what is obtainable here in Europe and you look back home, you see that we are really, really lacking behind as a country, as a continent. But hopefully we'll get there. Thank you very much for the great work you are doing. I really, really appreciate it for the history. Many of these people, they are our politicians, the powerful guys. We just hear their names. You don't know the history behind them, the history behind all those countries. It is this afternoon I'm just getting to know that, yeah, it's not that we just allow the Europeans into our territory like that. We can try to resist them, because we just think, okay, these people just come and invade our land, enslave us and all that. But yeah, if you go into history and understand what transpired, you will know that it wasn't easy thing like that for them too. So I really, really appreciate your work. I appreciate you, and thank you very much. Thank you for the class. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we resisted them. Even in Sokoto resisted them, but they came with better weapons. Oba Ovora Menogbaisi, the Oba of Benin, resisted them. The Benin kingdom resisted them. The Benin kingdom massacred them. But they went back reinforced and invaded Benin kingdom. Jajao Fokpobo resisted them. There was a book I recommended by Professor Tekena Tamuno, Oil Wars in the Delta. He took his time to give us the history of European incursion into the Oil River territory. He highlighted the resistances, but they came with superior weapons. We were using bow and arrow. And just one European officer could fire the cannon, boom, into the community, and the community goes up in flame. And the superior weapon was a function of superior knowledge. How many of them came to Africa? I just talked about Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama. They sailed on the high seas. That knowledge of building ship. So they could move from Europe to India on the high sea. And they loaded their ships with gunpowder. And there was this interview I had with Tony Falola. Falola is a great historian. And he makes the point that even Africa had manufactured gunpowder before Europe. Don't worry, I'll bring you that interview. But what did Africa do with it? And when you conquer a people on the basis of superior weapons, sometimes that conquest does not end. Last edition, I wanted to tell you about Japan. How Japan conquered the Korean peninsula and enslaved Korea. I won't even call that colonialism. They enslaved Korea. Then there was no North Korea or South Korea. Korea was one. I'll bring you that story so I don't mix it up. Thank you for taking us back. The lines are open. I want to hear from you. I don't need to finish my script. That's the truth. I want that engagement from you so that it's interactive. And you can also leave your comment. The artistic geniuses of the age of Renaissance are Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. You've heard the name? These are Italians. So now you know the history of Italy. I've talked about Machiavelli, Italians. The paintings of The Last Supper and Mona Lisa were masterpieces of Da Vinci. There's a book, The Da Vinci Code. Have you read that book? That book is so deep, The Da Vinci Code. I didn't finish it. I just got tired because the author was just taking me deeper and deeper. I just left it unfinished. Now that I've remembered, perhaps I'll take it. Once I get home, I'll read another 20 pages of the Da Vinci Code. So that's where the name comes from. Michelangelo, a celebrated sculptor, painted the immortal curved ceiling of the Sistine Chapel at the Papal Palace at the Vatican. He was one of the architects at the time of the construction of St. Peter's Basilica that did away with Gothic art. There's this big book I have of the Gothic art. I don't know why I've not explored that book, and I spent so much money buying it. Okay, I might not be able to read everything. That's just the truth, because I'm getting saturated. Anyway, my children will read it. I've bought them; they will read it. You see the power of art. When the Europeans got to Benin, what were they after? Benin art. They wanted Benin art, by all means. The present Obana is fighting with the governor over the artworks because they've returned some of them. Art is powerful. Art is great thinking. To create something from just thinking is great thinking. Michelangelo was one of the architects at the time of the construction of St. Peter's Basilica that did away with Gothic art. The design and the grandeur of the church remains unsurpassed to this day. Pure science, that is learning through first-hand knowledge, came about due to the epoch, the Renaissance epoch. Such learning came from observation, experimentation, and reasoning, leading to the first breakthrough in the knowledge of modern science made in astronomy. Have you read about Galileo Galilei? In science then, we read about in physics, Galileo Galilei, the sister, I think Pisa, something like Pisa. Galilei, he dropped the stone from that structure and it landed. Then we talked about gravitational pull. And he began to think of the law of gravitation. People like Isaac Newton took over, and we then have the law of motion. I think the first law of motion, as defined by Isaac Newton, states that a body will continue to move in a straight line unless it is acted upon by a force. Now, if you throw a football, you roll it, that if there is no force like wind or the grass motion, that body will continue to move in a straight line. So if you go into a vacuum now, where there is no air, and you roll a ball, the ball will move in a straight line because no force is acting to shake it off. That is great thinking. That is great thinking. He thought about, I think the third law states that to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. You can also use that to explain politics. if you had bad governance is the action. The reaction will be violence, poverty, insurrection, like is happening in Nigeria. I'm just thinking, trying to remember my signs. New continents and sea routes were discovered as Europe took giant steps towards scientific and technological progress. They had compasses that they were using to trace routes. Today you look at the map, I used to wonder how a plane leaves Lagos and is going to America. How will you know the road to take? There's no road here. In the air, it's just empty. But, they discovered those maps, devices to trace their ways. Today we talk about GPS, GIS. You are driving and you are using Google Map. All these were improvement of knowledge that came during the Renaissance. Google Map is telling you, take this road, take here. In your own community. And it's telling you how, we're going to Ikene now. I've not been to Ikene before. I wanted to visit, Awolowo's mausoleum, Awolowo's house. I wanted to have a conversation with Awolowo's only surviving daughter. I said, okay, we're going to Ikene. I said, yeah, let's use a Google Map in our community. So it was Google Map that was telling us, take care. That is thinking, science. Names like Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo Galilei are prominent in the scientific theories that gave Europe the push. That's why they conquered Africa. Superior knowledge, nothing else. And since then, Africa has refused to rise to the demands of the knowledge system. So we just copy anything they give us. So let me bring in Falola now. I want to bring in Falola. But before I bring in Falola, there are two books I want to talk about. And those books talk about Africa's knowledge system. This is one of them. It's such a big book. Heavy book. And most people run away from this book. It's too big. The Tony Falola Reader, An African Culture, Nationalism, Development. The Tony Falola Reader on African Culture, Nationalism, Development, and Epistemology. So these books talk about Africa's knowledge system. Now let me review a part of the book. The historian, Tony Falola, is a professor of African Studies and currently the Jacob and Francis Sanga Mosika Chair in the Humanities at the University of Texas at Austin. He has authored and edited more than 100 books, yes. If you are a constant viewer of the show, if you are always in class, you discover I'm always talking about Falola. Different books, Falola. When he was in Ife, he wasn't that productive. So what has happened to him? America has so transformed his scholarship. That's Falola everywhere. Environment matters. Falola is involved in complex historical investigations, interpreting cultural forms and norms through the application of Afrocentric argument. Falola's adventures into Africa's past reveal the validity of Africa's science and civilization, a phenomenon watered down by the continent's colonial experience. By the time the Europeans came to Benin, Benin had street lights. At night, the streets were lit at night. They saw streets that were lit at night. So the concept of street light has been in Africa. That did not exist in Europe at the time. Falola's rise to the hall of intellectual oracles is widely recognized. But his Africanist consciousness awaits deeper understanding by the Africans he defends. However, this does not dilute the globalist perspectives radiating from his works. In the book I just showed you, the Tony Falola Reader on African Culture, Nationalism, Development and Epistemologies, Falola examines the consequences of Africa's past on its today and tomorrow. In chapter 20, entitled Things Fall Apart, The Rise and Fall of the African Academy, Falola asserts that nationalism provoked the demand for academic institutions in much of Africa and suggested the themes for the first generation of scholars to examine. Scholars like Kenneth Dike, the first generation of African scholars. In the chapter 20 essay, Falola tells the story of Africanus hunting. Hunting called for an African university financed by government to train Africans in the sciences and technology. After more than 100 years since Hunting's call, African states are yet to be technologically savvy despite the establishment of numerous African universities of science and technology. Can this be linked to James Johnson's position that missionary education turned Africans into enemies of their own race? I recommend this book to you, the Tony Falola Reader on African Culture, Nationalism, Development, and Epistemology. Great book. Great book. Tony Falola is on state affairs.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
I'm discussing with a renowned historian, Professor Tony Falola. He is the author of the new book, The Tony Falola Reader. In the book, you will find the article, Things Fall Apart, The Rise and Fall of the African Academy. Is it not proper that we also demolish our traditional institutions and move straight into modernity?
Very good. That your question assumes that they were not modern in the first place.
Were they modern?
They were modern. So, and that is part of the problems. And I will give you a few examples. If you visit the king of Dahomey in the 19th century, if you're a foreigner, you'll be surprised that he will offer you French bread. You are going to take red wine. And I apologize for the third example. He will parade some 11 girls and ask you to choose one. That's modernity. Benin, the king of Benin, anyone you mention, Ukua Polopolo, any one of them, look at their clothes. They were Catholic and Portuguese. That's modernity. If you go to Central Africa, they've been sending their children to Portugal for education. But if you don't love those examples, let me take the example that I love the most, the masquerade, Ibadan, where I was born. Each year, the masquerade will add to its clothes. And by the time I was born, the masquerade was already wearing socks, which they call stockings, and was already wearing shoes. That's modernity. In the middle of the 19th century, in Ghana, the Fante began to write constitutions. Fante Constitution. In that same century, Egypt, under Muhammad Ali, redefined its constitution. Ethiopia, by the 19th century, had currencies, had roads, had printing presses. We've always been modernizing.
So at what point did the stagnation start?
Very good. It's a combination of the following. Number one, the enslavement of Africans between the 16th and the 19th century, in which would funnel abroad over 30 million people. And when you study the composition, it included large number of those who were thinking for you. And I will give you devastating examples, 3 examples. Tobacco consumption. This is part of the research I do. Very intense research, very time-consuming research. The spread of nicotine in relation to Atlantic slave trade was to enhance labor, intensity of the use of labor. It took us a long time to understand that. Second, they used to think Africans like to marry many wives. In every places that they took slaves, they unbalanced the ratios of men and women. It took us a long time to understand that what we call polygamy actually derived from population imbalance in which they took people. And we see the examples with the Irish potato crisis, which began to funnel Irish people into nunhood. Many of you will have come across sisters this, sister that. There were no men for them. And they channeled them into the Catholic Church to become nuns. More recently, is the Obama regime and pressure groups. Eritrea went to the parliament and wanted to insist that a man must marry 3 wives minimum. I'm talking about 2018, 2017. Why? Because in the fight against Ethiopia, they lost many men, and many of their men are crossing the Mediterranean. If you notice the death of Africans on Mediterranean Sea crossing to Europe, a large number of them are Eritreans. I'm just using those modern examples to tell you how this also happened to us. If you go to River State, areas of Cameroon, Bakassi Peninsula, you are going to see a man wrapping a piece of cloth around himself, drinking alcohol in the morning, and the women are tilling the land. We have been able to track why that was the case. As the demographic shifts of the Atlantic slave trade began to unbalance gender ratio, forcing women to do male jobs. That's one example of how this process began. Second, colonization, in which we became deformed by that colonial process. We were deformed. The logic of the economy shifted from food production to export production. The logic of the economy came monocrop. Ivory Coast produce ivory for us. Gold Coast produce gold and cocoa. They deformed those economies because those economies began to look outward. And that monocrop economy continues till today, where a country, by a stroke of luck, discovered oil in the Niger Delta, not only abused that oil, but in the process of using the oil, abuse all other sectors of the economy.
Can the African university system come to the rescue?
In terms of generating ideas, that's all what they could do. However, they've also failed, and we have to recognize that.
Professor Falola, in your article, you made mention of Africanus Hunting, who called for university financed by government to train Africans in technology and in science. This is foresight, right?
Yes.
After more than 100 years after this call, African states are yet to be technologically savvy in the modern sense of the word. Why?
And a more fundamental question is why they've not transformed Western knowledge to reform basic sciences and technologies. What do I mean? Why are we still making amala the same way? Why are we still farming the same way? Where do they use machete and hoes to farm in any part of the world anymore? How come The University of Ibadan, as Governor Aregbesola said in his keynote address at the conference, just a quarter of a mile outside of his campus, you begin to confront refuse. We have to do certain things. First of all, we call it return to the basics. What is it that we have contributed to civilization in terms of this science and technology? We capture them and we begin to make use of them. Second, what are the elements that we need the most for food production and food supply chain? Because if you ask me what is the fundamental issue, it's poverty. And many of these poverty-driven issues we can solve. I was part of a team we met in Brazil under Lula, and we came up with what we call the cassava option. That given the tremendous productivity of that cassava in terms of what it can generate under the soil, unlike yam that produces one, cassava has a capacity to solve all the starch problems. So we solved that. Because within 3 months, cassava gives you a lot of products. Convert it into starch, into gari, into alcohol, into that.
Yes. You see that interview, I'm going to upload it on all our social media platforms so that you have time to listen to it. It's about 18 minutes. Interrogating the knowledge system of Africa using the book I have recommended to you. I have recommended that book to you, the Tony Falola Reader. Now, there is something Falola did again that's inspired me. He did a research on African scholars capable of changing the world with their ideas. And he wrote about them and their works on this book, In Praise of Greatness. So in this book, Falola is praising great African intellectuals. And when you read it, you also appreciate what Africans are doing. And you know that Africa is coming. Yes. It's another big book. In Praise of Greatness, The Poetics of African Adulation. These are not the usual books. These are books for deep thinkers, deep readers. You see it? In Praise of Greatness. In Praise of Greatness, employing poems and prose, pays homage to those African scholars, artists, and public intellectuals who have been exemplary in developing significant ideas and institutional legacies with far-reaching political, social, and cultural impact. It's a celebration of knowledge. Without a knowledge system that is viable, Africa is going nowhere. You know, we have been laying so much emphasis on politics, but the knowledge system is weak. It is the knowledge system that gives strength to the political system. If you are interested in knowledge and you like books, you should like books. Get this book. Contact me on our WhatsApp numbers, and I will reserve your copies. Yes, we have this. This is a new collection. These are new arrivals. So we have about 50 copies of this book, and you will enjoy reading them. The books will inspire you. We are coasting home. I have been talking about European Renaissance, but I need to make this point clear that there were earlier renaissances in other civilizations. There were other renaissances in other civilizations. Let me go on YouTube. I can see Sonny Udenze. He says, "Good day to all well. Good day to all. Welcome to another day of lectures from State Affairs. Sonny, good to have you in class. Thank you for always being there. Bob Spam is on YouTube watching. He says, good to watch you live today. How are you doing? I'm doing good. I'm in search of knowledge. Always chasing knowledge. It makes me happy. I'm doing good. AAA, that's triple A. On YouTube says, oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for the encouraging words. It says, I'm shaping national and international developmental and intellectual discourses. Thank you. That is what the new age of technology is bringing. We can reach many people. You can create a classroom. And we can talk and learn from each other. Akintunde Kehinde Dari says, good day, Edmund. Congratulations for all the good work you do. I would like to hear more about Italy and Ethiopia story. I have a story for you. That Italy and Ethiopia story. You know, I am done with a story I'm writing about Emperor Haile Selassie, that emperor of Ethiopia, when Italy invaded Ethiopia. I'm done with that work, but I don't know the day I'm going to treat it here. But I'm done with the work, so I will tell you about it. Hopefully, I should treat it within next month. Yes. But I have that story for you. I have conducted all the interviews. It's just for me to tell the story. And it's an interesting story. You'll see how Emperor Haile Selassie had to run away from Ethiopia. And at some point, he addressed the word at the League of Nations. Eventually, Italy was pushed out of Ethiopia. That was the only time Ethiopia was occupied in history. I think Italy occupied Ethiopia for about 5 years. So Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that wasn't colonized. You can also see Liberia, because Liberia became like a dumping ground for slaves at the end of slavery. So they began to deport some Africans from the United States, from Britain. So most of the slaves from the US were dumped in Liberia. They were left there, okay, you go and take care of yourself. Yoruba slaves, slaves from different parts of the world, Igbo slaves, slaves from thieves. You know, Africans were involved in slavery, but some parts of Nigeria were more involved. And that is why if you see the history of the first newspaper in Nigeria, Iwe Iroyin, that was established by, what's his name again? Henry Townsend. You know, the first newspaper was established in Abeokuta, Egba land, by Henry Townsend. Henry Townsend at some point went to Liberia and came back with some missionaries. If you trace this history, even when Henry Townsend went to Egba land, he was resisted. Someday I will tell you media history in Nigeria, because media history tells you political history. And I was privileged to have taught media history in a university. I'm still researching to know more. So, before European Renaissance, there were earlier renaissances in other civilizations. There were Mayan classic period, that is 300 to 900. And there was the early centuries of Korea's Joseon dynasty. That was between 1392 to 1897, before Korea dynasty collapsed. What about the Islamic Golden Age, 750 to 1260? You know, I subscribe to some Islamic literature. They are rich literature, so I am studying Islam. So when I read it, I see Islamic history. I've just told you about the Ottoman Empire. There was also China's Tang dynasty, 618 to 907. That dynasty brought significant changes to social order as India's Gupta Empire. Okay. Look at this. I'm coming. Look at this book. What Civilizations. Look at this book. What Civilizations. It's a great read. We only have one more copy. This is my personal copy. When I bought it, I bought two. I only found two. So I have one copy left. If you are interested, this is the copy. I'll give it to you. What Civilizations. Written by Philip Adler, Rondell Povels. You can see Europeans are writing. See the book? It will teach you about the different civilizations of the world, and you begin to say, lessons of history. By the Asian geography of these renaissances I've just mentioned, you would agree with me that Asia is a source of potent ideas. Olatunde Obashola, I hope. Hello?
Hello, my brother. Good afternoon.
Yes, I'm on radio, Obashola.
Oh, okay.
So I'll call you
back.
back.
Let me leave you.
I'll call you back.
Leave a message.
All right. Yes. By the Asian geography I've described, I mean the other renaissances I just talked about, they are all from Asia. It is clear that Asia is a source of potent ideas that drove human progress before Europe caught up. By the time of European Renaissance, Asia, where you have China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, Iran, Iraq, by the time of European Renaissance, Asia was the most advanced civilization. By the 1450s, when Gutenberg created his printing press, Europe was 300 years behind China's block printers, producing books for public consumption. So the China you see today had reasons beyond Europe before, but there was the fall of China due to war. They were fighting against themselves. You know, when you fight against yourself, you fall. That's what happened to Yoruba civilization. Yoruba civilization would have comfortably resisted Europeans. From what? From my research. Yorubas would have comfortably resisted Europeans. But they were fighting themselves, killing themselves for years. So by the time Europeans came, they were tired. In fact, they ran to the Europeans, please come and settle us. We studied the Kparakpo Wars, that Kiriji War, the Ijaye War. So by the time Europeans came, Yorubas ran to Europeans, please settle us. We are tired. They fought themselves to stupor. It was Awolowo that was able to unite the Yoruba nation through politics again. Yes. As early as the 20th century, Kaifeng, China's old capital, was a million-person metropolis. The civilization of the Orient, that is Asia, when you talk about Oriental culture, the civilization of the Orient, Asia, was superior to that of Western world. Even the Greeks owned a great deal of their earlier cultures to Asia. Hellenistic civilization reached its highest development in Egypt and Western Asia, rather than in Greece. All great religions of the world originated in Asia. This includes Christianity and Islam. In the 8th and 9th centuries, Baghdad, now the capital of Iraq, was the biggest intellectual center of the world. That is why when you go to these Arab countries, you see the kind of structures, you know they've come a long way. You know, structures sometimes tells you the history of a people. Africans did not build structures, we built thatched houses that were easily burnt down. Okay, you could find some in Mali. You know, Mali was a huge civilization, the Malian Empire. Not culture, but they were not really represented in monuments. Like if you go to Italy now, you see old monuments. You see that Anfield building. If you even look at the Basilica, that can tell you about European history. If you go to London, you see buildings that are 600 years old and well built at that time. Though Europe, on the back of the Renaissance, followed by the Age of Enlightenment, overtook Asia, but events of the 21st century show that Asia is rising again. China, Japan, Korea, the Asian tigers, they are rising again. What about Africa? In the book The Civilization of Trial, published in 1948, Arnold Toynbee says that the revolt of Asia may prove to be the most significant development of the 20th century. He was right. According to him, the challenge of communism may come to seem a small affair when the probably far more potent civilization of India and China respond in their turn to Western challenge. You know, we are talking more about China, but India is rising. What about Africa? We are coming. He says, in the long run, Asians seem likely to produce much more deeper effects on Western life than Russian communism. You can see how America is struggling to deal with China, banning TikTok. It is the fear of the rise of China. Robert Paine wrote the book The Revolt of Asia in 1947. He says the major task of his generation was the understanding of Asia, that Asia represents potentially the mystery of the world in manpower and resources. The Paines moved beyond that. The Paines moved beyond what obtains to what obtained in their predictions of the future of Asia. You know what those old European scholars did was to use Asia's past to explain the future. You see how they think? So they are trying to check Asia. You know, America is in Taiwan, trying to check China. America is in the Philippines, hovering now around the South China Sea, trying to check China. Because they've seen it coming, just that they cannot stop it. What about Africa? Asia's contribution to world civilization is not in doubt. What about Africa? The continent has not influenced world civilization in a tremendous way. I'm talking about Africa. Africa's investment in the universal competition and expression of indigenous religion is minimal. However, Africa is indigenizing its ways politically and economically. Its cultural influence was weakened by the occupation of Europe, resulting in aggressive reformation of its cultural identities to favor the forces recreating it. Therefore, the African continent encountered Islam and Christianity. One is not constrained to argue that Africa can use the signs of her cultural forms for development. It is ongoing. It reflects the resurgence of Asian values. You see, this class is an example of African resurgence. Yes, take it. Asia might not be where it wants to be, but its progress is the making of its cultural originality. China maintained its Confucian tradition, and when I say Confucian tradition, despite having fallen to the paths of invading forces bent on conquering its cultural spirit. Don't forget, Britain invaded China at some point. Remember the Opium War? And captured Hong Kong. You know, Hong Kong was with Britain for a long time until Britain handed back Hong Kong to China. The Chinese resistance of these forces is expressed in their present rise. Therefore, countries that have advanced are those in control of their cultural spirit. It doesn't mean they will not learn from other cultures, but they choose what they want to learn and use it for development. You don't force it down their throat. China may have borrowed from other civilizations because of diffusion, but the Chinese determines the direction he goes in expression of his or her national interest. Let me leave it at this. Let's step down at this point. I will round off by telling you about this book. Look at it. Voyages in World History. You see the books I read? Voyages in World History. I also bought 2 copies of this book. I have one left. Contact me. These are good books. You can't read this book. See, those who are able to read books like this, when they have the opportunities to become political leaders, they can't fail. Trust me. There's something that will happen to your thinking. Because you have a deep knowledge of the word, you will know how to govern your country. Though it will not be easy, but you will do that and lift your people out of poverty. That is why American scholars or American leaders are deep in history. They are knowledgeable. Chinese scholars are schooled in world history. Go and see how they are brought up. Study the making of a Chinese leader. And that's why when you see Indian leaders, when they speak, they are brought up in their cultural expression, even though they run modern democracy. But the Indian system remains influenced by Hindu tradition. I recommend this book to you, Voyages in World History. So the last book I'm recommending, all these are books we just have one copies, because you can hardly find them in the market again. Look at this, A History of Western Society. I have a copy, and this is an extra copy. I was archiving them, but I'm ready to give them out. If you can pay for them. Yes. Thank you for always being there. And someday I'll give out some books on this program. We'll give out some books to our regular listeners and viewers. Thank you for always following the program. I am Edmondo Pillow. I will not be here on Friday because I will be on the road. But I'll be back on Monday in this studio. But don't forget to join me on Saturday on Splash 105.5 FM, the Integrity Station. That program starts from 8 to 11 a.m. You don't have to miss that edition. I told you I went to Awolowo's house. I have a story to tell you. I told Awolowo something. I don't know if he heard me. I don't know if Awo heard me. But join me on Saturday, 8 to 11 a.m. on this page, and you will know if Awo heard me or not. Thank you for being there.